I've been a trucker for almost 20 years. I've never been superstitious, but I've always believed the road has its secrets. I work night shifts because the roads are quieter, and it helps me think. That day, I was hauling a load of appliances from Texas to Arizona, a long and lonely route. It was around 2 in the morning, and my only companions were the hum of the engine and the darkness swallowing everything around me. The highway felt endless, like a tunnel of asphalt surrounded by nothing but distant trees. My old CB radio crackled occasionally, picking up static or brief transmissions from other drivers. It all started like any other night. I was adjusting the radio volume to break the monotony when a voice suddenly came through. It was deep but calm, almost casual. "If anyone's listening, I just want to say something," the voice said, cutting through the silence like a knife. I thought it was another trucker, maybe someone bored and looking for a chat. But what came next made me uncomfortable. "I killed someone today," he continued, like he was confessing something trivial. My whole body froze. At that moment, I thought it was some sort of joke or a cruel prank. I sat there for a few seconds, the truck rolling down the road like nothing had happened. But my heart was pounding so hard it echoed in the cab. I grabbed the CB mic, intending to ask who was talking, but before I could say anything, the voice continued. Actually, it was the third. The first two weren't too hard, but this one was special. He begged, he cried, he pleaded for his life. Every word felt like a weight pressing down on me. The voice spoke slowly, deliberately, like savoring every detail. I pressed the mic button, but all I could manage was a choked, "Who are you?" The voice chuckled, low and emotionless. "You're listening because you're supposed to." I dropped the mic as if it burned my hand. I glanced around looking for some logical explanation. Maybe it was a transmission bleeding through from another channel. Maybe a movie or something. But there were no other vehicles in sight. The road was completely empty. Just my cab lit by the dashboard and the darkness beyond the headlights. I tried switching channels, but the voice stayed, as if locked onto my radio. "I always tell someone, it's the only way I feel real." My mind tried to find rational explanations, but something about the tone of that voice made it impossible to dismiss. He went on. "The road's a funny place, isn't it? So many people come and go. Nobody knows who you are or where you're from. It's the perfect place to disappear." A chill ran down my spine. The voice felt close, like it was sitting right there in the cab with me. I grabbed the mic again, this time with more determination, and snapped back. "Look, I don't know who you are, but this isn't funny. Turn it off now." The voice, however, ignored my attempt to push back. "You still don't get it, do you? I'm nowhere. But I'm everywhere." I stared at the dashboard, trying to distract myself, but my eyes kept darting to the mirrors. Nothing but empty road behind me. The silence of the highway, which had once been comforting, now felt oppressive. My stomach churned, and my hands were so sweaty they nearly slipped off the wheel. The voice spoke again, as if it could feel what I was experiencing. "The last one was near a road like this, a rundown motel. She trusted me. That was her mistake." I closed my eyes for a second, trying to block it out, but the image popped into my head anyway. Someone in a dingy motel room, terrified, with no escape. Suddenly the static on the radio grew louder, cutting off the voice for a moment. I seized the opportunity to turn off the device, but the knob wouldn't budge. It was like it was glued in place. I tried pulling the cord out, but nothing worked. The voice came back, quieter this time, almost a whisper. "Did you know fear has a smell? I can sense it even from here." A shiver coursed through me. I was almost convinced this was some sort of nightmare. Maybe I was overtired, maybe I'd dozed off and dreamt it all. But then, he said something that made me realize this was real. "You're passing a gas station right now, aren't you?" I slammed on the brakes instinctively, glancing to the side. There it was, exactly as he described it. A small, dimly lit gas station with a single pump and a closed store. There were no cars parked there, and the flickering lights made it look like they were about to give out. A primal fear gripped me. How did he know where I was? I grabbed my phone to call the police, but there was no signal. The road, once a refuge, now felt like it was trapping me in a game I didn't understand how to win. I was breathing heavily, my hands shaking on the wheel, but I forced my eyes back to the road. I had to get out of there, find some cell signal or another vehicle, anything to reconnect with the real world. As I sped up, the voice returned, now more distorted, as if it was reveling in my fear. "Do you think you can escape?" They thought so too. A low laugh followed the words, sending shivers down my spine. I checked my mirrors again, half expecting to see something behind me, but the road remained desolate. Every shadow cast by the headlights seemed alive, as if something was lurking just out of sight. I decided to ignore him, focusing only on driving until I reached the next sign of civilization, but he seemed to know exactly what I was thinking. "Do you think you won't look? That you won't try to understand? That's what I enjoy. The moment they realize it doesn't matter what they do." My foot pressed harder on the gas, the engine roaring against the oppressive silence. The landscape around me blurred, trees and light poles whipping past, but something ahead caught my eye. A car was stopped on the shoulder, its hazard lights blinking. This was my chance to find help. As I got closer, I realized the vehicle was old, a sedan from the 80s with peeling paint. I slowed down, my instinct to help warring with the growing dread in my chest. I peered into the car as I passed, but it was empty. The engine was off, and the doors were locked. It looked like it had been abandoned there for decades. Before I could decide what to do, the voice on the radio returned. "Beautiful, isn't it? A monument to the ones who came before you." I slammed on the brakes, my heart pounding. This was impossible. He could see everything I was doing, but there wasn't another vehicle for miles. My mind started to unravel. Every sound, every shadow seemed to be watching me. With sweaty hands, I decided the only logical move was to stop at the next lit-up place and wait for daylight. I kept driving, the radio now crackling intermittently, as if the voice was waiting for the right moment to return. Finally, I saw a small diner glowing in the distance, its neon sign flickering, casting eerie shadows on the worn-out walls. For the first time in hours, I felt a flicker of hope, until the voice whispered again, so softly I almost didn't hear it. "That's where it ends." I slowed down and parked in the diner's lot, which felt like an oasis amidst the suffocating darkness. The flickering neon sign cast dancing shadows on the cracked pavement. Inside, I could see a few empty tables and a waitress with gray hair wiping down the counter. Everything seemed absurdly normal, and for a moment the idea of being safe gave me a sliver of hope. I turned off the engine, and the radio finally went silent. Grabbing my bag, I stepped inside, the chime of the doorbell echoing in the quiet space. "Good evening, can I help you?" the waitress asked, her voice kind but tired. I sat at one of the tables near the window, giving me a clear view of my truck outside. I ordered a strong coffee, hoping it would steady my nerves. I glanced around, searching for some explanation for what had just happened, but the place was too ordinary to hold any mysteries. I pulled out my phone again. Still no signal. The waitress returned with my coffee, and I decided to ask, "Have you heard anything strange on the radio tonight? Any weird transmissions?" She paused, her brow furrowing slightly. "Honey, nobody's used CB radios around here in years. Most truckers who stop here just charge their phones and move on." My hands went cold. The coffee in the cup felt tasteless. Before I could say anything else, the roar of an engine outside made me freeze. I looked out the window and saw a truck parked beside mine. Its cab was lit up, but I couldn't see who was inside. Static erupted from my radio again, loud and insistent, even though my truck was completely off. "You're clever. You made it far, but everyone stops somewhere." The voice was there, in the diner, as if it had followed me. I stood abruptly, my heart pounding like a drum, but the waitress seemed oblivious to everything. I rushed outside, trying to ignore the fact that my radio was functioning without power. The other truck disappeared the moment I reached mine. I climbed into the cab, manually shut off the radio, and ripped out the wires for good measure. Nothing else happened that night. I made it to my destination without any further interruptions, but I never used that CB radio again. I threw it away at the first chance I got. To this day, I don't know who or what was on that frequency, but every time I see a diner glowing on the side of the road, I think twice before stopping. Working as a truck driver was never exactly my dream, but it paid the bills. I was 32 at the time, driving long hours on roads that were almost always empty, stopping only to refuel or grab a quick bite. That day, I was hauling a load of home appliances, heading from one small town in the middle of nowhere to an even smaller one. It was an easy route, almost too quiet, with only a few cars passing by. My radio was broken, so the only sound keeping me company was the engine's hum. It was almost dusk when the engine suddenly jerked, and I felt the truck lose power. My heart started racing. This road was deserted, with no cell service, and the nearest gas station was almost 30 miles away. Reluctantly, I pulled the truck over onto a narrow shoulder where the road barely allowed any room. When I got out to check what was going on, the chilly night air took me by surprise. I didn't remember hearing anything about a cold front. Grabbing the flashlight I always kept on the dashboard, I walked to the front of the truck, trying to ignore the feeling that something was off. The engine was warm but seemed fine at first glance. It wasn't until I shined the light closer that I noticed something strange. The ignition wires were cut. Not frayed, not worn out, cleanly cut, as if someone had used a knife or pliers. My stomach twisted. I looked around, trying to make sense of it. Maybe someone sabotaged the truck earlier while I was stopped somewhere, but it didn't make sense. Who would do that in the middle of nowhere? The road was completely deserted, and all I could hear was the wind rustling through the trees. Taking a deep breath, I tried to stay calm. I decided to fix as much as I could on my own. Luckily, I always carried a toolbox in the back compartment. Grabbing the tools, I crouched down by the engine, holding the flashlight between my teeth. That's when I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, crunching on dry leaves that I was sure hadn't been there when I pulled over. I jumped to my feet, feeling my whole body go cold. I swung the flashlight around but saw nothing. "Hey!" I yelled, my voice echoing louder than I expected. No response. Just the wind and the faint echo of my voice fading into the night. "Is someone out there?" The silence that followed was so heavy it felt like the entire world was holding its breath. I forced myself to chuckle, trying to convince myself I was just nervous. It was probably an animal, a deer or something. Even so, my hand trembled as I adjusted the flashlight. Deep down, I knew I wasn't alone. I went back to the engine, but my attention was split. I couldn't stop glancing into the darkness around me, feeling a tight knot in my chest every time the wind rustled the trees. The tools felt heavier in my hands, and the flashlight shook slightly as I tried to reconnect the wires. The problem was worse than I'd expected. Whoever had cut them knew exactly what they were doing. Every second crouched there felt like an eternity. And then I heard it again. Footsteps, closer this time. I stood up so fast I hit my head on the truck's hood, cursing loudly into the night. "If someone's out there, this isn't funny," I yelled, my voice already tinged with desperation. Nothing. But I knew someone was there. I could feel it. It was like the tangible sensation you get when you know someone is staring at you. I grabbed the tire iron lying on the ground and gripped it tightly, as if it could offer me any real protection. With the flashlight in one hand and the tool in the other, I started walking around the truck, trying to convince myself that it was all in my head. That's when I saw something that made me freeze. There were footprints in the dry dirt, leading to and from the back of the truck. Human footprints, large and heavy, that hadn't been there when I pulled over. Each step I took to follow the trail made the silence around me feel thicker, like the night itself was watching. I reached the back of the truck and stopped. The door was still closed, but something wasn't right. There were scratch marks on the lock, like someone had tried to force it open. The chill I felt wasn't from the wind anymore. It was pure fear. I took a deep breath and aimed the flashlight closer, praying it was just my imagination. That's when I heard the most unsettling sound of the night. Heavy, uneven breathing, as if someone was standing right behind me. My heart raced. I spun the flashlight around quickly, but there was nothing there. Nothing I could see, at least. My eyes darted through the darkness, but all I could make out were the motionless trees and the empty road. I rushed back into the truck, locking the door behind me. My breathing was quick, and cold sweat dripped down my back. I grabbed my phone, even though I knew there was no signal out there. It didn't matter. It was my last shred of hope. I gripped the phone tightly, praying it would at least let me call for help. As I tried to find a spot with service, the entire truck shook. A hard thud, like someone had kicked the side. My heart felt like it was about to explode, but I forced myself to look. I shone the flashlight through the window, hoping to see something, anything. But all I saw was my own reflection, pale and terrified, staring back at me. I stood still for a few seconds, trying to process what had just happened. The truck had definitely shaken. I wasn't imagining it. I tried convincing myself it could have been the wind, or maybe some animal bumping into it, but that didn't make sense. Something, or someone, was out there. I looked at the dashboard, and my heart sank when I noticed the headlights flickering, like someone had tampered with the electrical system. I took a deep breath, fighting off the panic, and decided I couldn't just sit there. If I couldn't fix the engine, I'd have to leave on foot. I grabbed a spare flashlight from the glove box and my pocket knife. It wasn't much, but it was all I had. I opened the truck door slowly, my hand trembling so much I almost dropped the knife. The night was even quieter than before, as if even the wind had stopped blowing. I took a step outside and paused, listening. Nothing. Then I started walking in the opposite direction from where I'd heard the footsteps earlier, hoping that whatever it was would stay behind me. The road felt longer and darker than I remembered, and every little sound made my heart race. That's when I saw something up ahead, in the middle of the road. A man. He was standing completely still, like a statue, and it felt like he was staring straight at me. I aimed the flashlight at his face, but I couldn't make out any details. The light reflected back at me, like he was wearing something over his face. "Who are you? What do you want?" I shouted, trying to sound confident, but my voice shook. He didn't respond. He just stood there watching me. I took 2 steps back, and that's when he started walking toward me. Slowly, deliberately, every step seemed calculated. I turned and started running, but I knew I had nowhere to go. The truck was too far, and the forest lining the road felt like an even worse trap. All I could do was keep running. Finally, I saw lights in the distance. Headlights. A car was coming my way. I ran into the middle of the road, waving frantically, and the driver stopped. It was a middle-aged man, and he rolled down the window as I tried to explain between gasps what had happened. He let me in, and we drove off as fast as we could. When I looked back, the figure was gone. The man took me to the nearest police station, but when we returned to the site with the authorities, there was no sign of anything. No footprints, no cut wires, no figure. To this day, I don't know who or what was after me that night, but one thing's for sure: I'll never take that road again. I've been a truck driver for about 12 years, and until that night, I thought I'd seen it all on the road. It was November 2017, and I was hauling a shipment of car parts from Dallas to a small town in Montana. The trip was long, but I've always enjoyed the silence of late-night drives. The radio playing softly, the steady hum of the engine, and my strong cup of coffee were all I needed. But that day, things spiraled completely out of control. I still can't explain what happened. The night was deep, probably close to 2 a.m., when I decided to stop at a small truck stop in the middle of nowhere. There was nothing for miles, just the highway and the darkness. A flickering neon sign with the word "Open" caught my eye, but the place looked run down. The building was small, with an attached diner advertising homemade pies and the best coffee around. My tank wasn't empty, but I knew this was the last stop before a long stretch of desolation. So I parked my truck and went to check it out. As soon as I walked in, the first thing I noticed was the silence. A heavy, oppressive silence that seemed to muffle even the sound of the door closing behind me. The place was empty, not exactly dirty, but it had an air of abandonment. A jukebox in the corner was off but still faintly glowing, casting dim light on the booths. In the middle of the diner, there was a table with a half-eaten meal and a steaming cup of coffee. It looked like someone had left in a hurry. My gut told me to go back to my truck, but curiosity got the better of me. I walked closer to the table. The coffee smelled fresh. Next to the plate was a receipt, and for some reason I decided to pick it up. It was stamped with the date of that very day, about an hour earlier. That made things even more confusing. Who eats half their food and abandons it like that? I looked around again, and that's when I noticed something strange. A trail of marks on the floor, like something heavy had been dragged from the counter to the back door. The trail on the floor seemed to be made of something greasy, mixed with dirt and small reddish stains I couldn't identify at first. My heart started racing, but I tried to stay calm. Maybe it was just some kind of recent accident. Something spilled, and the staff went to clean up, I thought. But as I followed the marks with my eyes to the back door, I noticed it was slightly ajar. The wind made a low, eerie sound as it slipped through the gap, almost like a whisper creeping through the diner. I don't know what gave me the nerve, but I decided to take a look outside. Before opening the door fully, I called out a few times, asking if anyone was there. "Hello? Is anyone there? Are you okay?" Only the sound of my own voice echoed back. The back lot was empty, except for a dumpster and an old pickup truck that looked like it had been sitting there for decades. The engine was cold, and the thick layer of dust on the hood suggested it hadn't been used in a long time. I went back inside, trying to figure out what to do. That feeling of something being very wrong was impossible to shake. I decided to check the counter for more clues, but that's when things got even weirder. On the counter was a radio, but it was only emitting static, occasionally interrupted by faint bursts of interference. It sounded like it was trying to tune into a signal but couldn't quite get there. Beside it was a name tag that had fallen over with the words, "Welcome, my name is Lisa," handwritten on it. That was the first real indication that someone should have been there. Then I noticed a small door behind the counter which probably led to the kitchen. Something told me not to open it, but I couldn't resist. I pushed the door open slowly and was immediately hit by a strange, metallic, sour smell that nearly made me gag. The kitchen was darker than the rest of the diner, with a single flickering bulb casting eerie shadows on the walls. Somewhere in the room, the sound of a dripping liquid echoed faintly. When I shone my flashlight on the floor, I realized what it was. The greasy reddish stains from the dining room had pooled there into a small dark puddle. That puddle froze me in place. It wasn't just grease mixed with dirt. It was blood. Not a massive amount, but enough to make my head spin with questions. I tried to rationalize it. A kitchen accident? Someone cut themselves and ran to get help? But everything felt off. I looked around the kitchen again and saw that the marks continued toward the industrial freezer in the corner, its door slightly ajar. A chill ran down my spine, and this time, it wasn't just from the cold air leaking out. I hesitated, almost turned back to my truck, but something inside me compelled me to investigate. Slowly, I opened the freezer door. The cold air hit my face, and for a moment, everything felt completely still, like the world outside had disappeared. The inside was a mess, supplies scattered everywhere, torn packages littering the floor, and in the back, something I'll never forget. A dirty apron with a name tag still attached. Lisa? It was stained with dried blood, and next to it was a large knife, also bloodied. I stepped back, feeling my stomach churn, and that's when something bizarre happened. The radio on the counter began to hiss louder, the static growing more intense until it felt like it was vibrating in my skull. Then, a voice broke through. It was faint, almost a whisper, but I heard it clearly. "Don't leave." My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst. Was it a warning? A command? A threat? I couldn't tell. Every instinct I had screamed at me to run. I bolted back into the dining area, but something was different. The air felt thick, heavy, like I was underwater. The jukebox, which had been off before, was now playing a slow, haunting melody. And on the same table with the half-eaten meal, there was something new, a small key with a piece of paper attached. The paper had shaky handwriting on it, reading, "Use this if you want to leave." I wasn't sure what to do. My mind was spinning between grabbing the key, ignoring everything, and running for my truck. But there was something about all of it that felt like a test, as if every choice I made was part of some twisted game. Slowly, I approached the table and picked up the key with trembling hands. It was cold, colder than it should have been. I scanned the room again, expecting someone or something to appear, but the diner remained empty, the jukebox's eerie tune the only sound. I went back to the counter, clutching the key tightly, and that's when I noticed something I hadn't seen before. A side door, heavy and wooden, with a rusted lock that matched the key in my hand. My mind was shouting for me to run back to my truck, but my legs moved on their own. I turned the key in the lock, and it resisted at first, but eventually gave way. As the door creaked open, a foul smell of damp earth and decay hit me. On the other side of the door was a staircase leading down into a dimly lit basement. I knew I shouldn't go down, but something was pulling me, almost as if I was being guided. Each step felt like it was taking me deeper into something I couldn't comprehend. The walls were covered in strange symbols drawn in what looked like dried blood. At the bottom of the stairs, there was a small room, empty except for an old ornate mirror propped against the wall. But the reflection didn't make sense. Through the mirror, I could see the diner's dining area, now filled with people, all seated, staring directly at me. That was the moment I felt my sanity slipping away. I heard footsteps behind me, and before I could turn around, the basement door slammed shut with a deafening bang. Everything went black. When I woke up, I was in my truck, parked on the side of the road. The truck stop, the diner, they were gone. It was as if the place had been wiped off the map. To this day, I don't know if what happened was real, or if my mind was playing tricks on me. But every time I drive through a desolate area at night, I feel that same cold shiver running down my spine, like it's still watching, waiting for me to stop again. I've been a truck driver for over 10 years, and if there's one thing I've learned, it's that the road can be both your best friend and your worst enemy. This happened to me in the fall of 2017 during a trip from Oregon to Arizona. I was hauling a load of construction materials, and the deadline was tight, as usual. After driving nearly 12 hours without a break, I decided to stop at a truck stop I'd never used before. A rundown place on the side of the highway, in the middle of nowhere. The GPS showed the next stop was almost 80 miles away, and I just couldn't keep going. The truck stop looked abandoned, with only 2 other trucks parked there, and an eerie, decayed atmosphere that immediately unsettled me. But exhaustion won out. The place had those flickering fluorescent lights casting strange, shifting shadows over the cracked asphalt. It was almost completely silent, except for the wind rattling rusty signs and the low hum of an old refrigerator near the convenience store, which was clearly out of business. I parked my truck near an old, out-of-service fuel pump, away from the other vehicles. Despite the unsettling vibe, I did what any trucker would do: locked the doors, pulled the curtains shut, and lay down on the sleeper bunk, hoping I'd pass out quickly. But that night, sleep was the last thing I was going to get. The first sign that something was wrong was subtle. Around 2 a.m. I woke up with an odd feeling, like something wasn't quite right. I didn't hear anything specific, but the silence felt heavier. I grabbed the flashlight I always keep by my bed and peeked through a crack in the curtain. Outside, the darkness was almost total, except for the flickering lights of the truck stop and the dim glow of the moon lighting up the dusty asphalt. That's when I noticed it. Footprints in the dirt, right next to my truck. They hadn't been there when I parked. The footprints looked fresh, long and deep, like someone had been walking barefoot in the thick dust. My heart started pounding, but I tried to convince myself it was nothing. Maybe someone from one of the other trucks had stepped out for a bit, though I hadn't heard anyone approach. I lay back down, gripping the flashlight tightly, but I couldn't relax. I kept the curtain slightly open, my ears straining for any sound. Then I heard it, a soft tap-tap against the side of my trailer, like someone had knocked twice and darted away. I froze for a few seconds, gripping the flashlight so tightly that my fingers started tingling. The sound was so faint I almost thought I imagined it, but the silence afterward felt like it was mocking me for trying to rationalize it. Summoning my courage, I pulled back the curtain again and shone the flashlight toward the side of the truck. There was nothing there. The stop was just as empty as before, with the flickering lights casting their eerie glow and shadows creeping along the ground. But then I noticed something odd. As the beam of light swept across the side of the trailer, I saw a faint streak in the dust, like someone had dragged a hand or leaned against it recently. I crawled back into the sleeper bunk, knowing there was no way I could fall asleep now. My heart was racing, and every small noise, the hum of the truck, the occasional creak of the cabin, put me on edge. I tried to convince myself it might have been an animal or something harmless, but the thought of someone lurking around outside wouldn't leave my mind. A few minutes later I heard another sound, this time farther away, like something scratching against metal. My stomach sank. I knew the sound was coming from my trailer. I grabbed my phone and checked the time. 2:27 a.m. The minutes dragged on, each one heavier than the last. Finally, I decided I couldn't just sit there waiting for whatever or whoever it was to come closer. I grabbed my jacket, laced up my boots, and took the iron bar I always kept handy for emergencies. When I opened the door, a blast of cold wind hit me, carrying the smell of damp dust. I climbed down slowly, shining the flashlight at the ground. My footsteps echoed oddly in the stillness, and every shadow seemed more menacing than it had any right to be. When I reached the back of the trailer, I saw something that made my breath catch. Handprints in the dust on the trailer doors. They were clear, small, but unmistakably fresh. I swallowed hard and started making my way back to the cab, trying not to run. Each step felt like a battle against my instincts, which screamed at me to bolt. Just as I reached the door, I heard it again, something behind me. A soft sound, almost like breathing. I didn't wait to find out what it was. I climbed back into the cab and locked everything immediately. I sat in the driver's seat, gripping the iron bar tightly, my eyes fixed on the curtain, waiting for any movement. Outside, the wind carried an ominous weight, and the silence of the night seemed to stretch endlessly. The rest of the night was a test of nerves. I kept glancing at the clock on the dashboard, counting the minutes until sunrise, but time seemed to crawl at an almost torturous pace. The silence outside didn't help. It was as if the truck stop itself was holding its breath along with me. Every tiny sound, the creak of the cabin, the rustling of the wind, made my heart race. I thought about starting the engine and driving off, but the stretch of highway I'd covered earlier was full of sharp curves, and driving while that exhausted would have been a death sentence. All I could do was sit there and hope whoever or whatever was outside would lose interest and leave me alone. Around 4:30 a.m., the sky started to lighten, and the tension in my chest eased just a little. The faint glow of dawn brought a shred of comfort, though my body felt like it had gone through a full night of combat. I waited until the sun was fully up before I dared to step out of the cab again. When I finally opened the door, the truck stop was eerily silent. The daylight revealed details I hadn't noticed the night before. Shards of glass scattered near the boarded-up convenience store, a sign swinging precariously from a single screw, and strangest of all, the footprints I'd seen earlier were still there. But now there were more of them. I was just about to climb back into the truck when I noticed the message. Written in the dust on my windshield were the words, "Never sleep here again." I stood there, staring at it as if it might suddenly disappear. The handwriting was thin, with long, slanted letters, and it gave off an unsettling sense of calm, like whoever wrote it took their time. My mind raced, trying to piece together how and when this could have happened. I hadn't seen anyone at the truck stop besides myself, and the two other trucks that had been parked there when I arrived were gone by morning. The place was completely deserted. I climbed back into the cab, took a deep breath, and started the engine. I drove away without looking back, the warning still visible on the windshield like a permanent reminder. To this day, I think about that night. I tried researching the truck stop later, but I couldn't find anything. No records of incidents or strange occurrences. Some fellow truckers mentioned hearing rumors about weird things happening in that area, but no one could give me specifics. All I know is that since then, I've never stopped at another truck stop that looked abandoned, no matter how tired I am. The road has its own rules, and that night, I learned them the hard way. I've been a truck driver for nearly 20 years, but what happened to me one foggy night in November still gives me chills. At the time, I was hauling auto parts from Dallas to a small town in Oklahoma. It was one of those long, solitary trips I was used to. The highway I took was known for being desolate, especially at night, and that evening, the weather was no help. A thick fog blanketed the road, making it nearly impossible to see more than a few feet ahead. The radio was nothing but static, and all I could hear was the hum of the engine and the muffled sound of the tires on the wet asphalt. I've never minded the solitude of the road before, but that night felt different. It was hard to explain, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. I drove slowly, trying to keep the truck steady as the fog swallowed everything around me. That's when I saw it for the first time. A figure stood on the shoulder of the road, partially obscured by the mist, but I could make out a few details. It looked like a man, average height, wearing what seemed to be a long coat. He had one arm raised, signaling for me to stop. At first, I hesitated. It wasn't unusual to see hitchhikers on these remote highways, but something about the way he stood there unnerved me. He didn't move, just stood there, almost as if he knew I wouldn't have a choice but to stop. Against my better judgment, I slowed down and brought the truck to a halt a few yards away. I rolled down the window expecting him to approach, but he didn't. The headlights illuminated part of his body, but the rest was swallowed by the fog. I called out, half annoyed, asking if he needed help. No response. Then, without warning, he turned around and walked into the mist. I sat there staring, as he vanished within seconds. A chill ran down my spine. Probably just some lost guy, I muttered to myself, trying to brush it off. I started the truck again and kept driving, but I couldn't stop replaying the scene in my head. About 15 minutes later, I saw the figure again. Same position, standing on the shoulder of the road, arm raised as if asking for help. My heart started racing. I knew it was impossible. He was behind me, miles behind, and there was no way he could have gotten ahead of me so quickly. This time, I didn't stop. I drove right past him, but I couldn't stop myself from glancing in the rearview mirror. He was still there, standing motionless, his silhouette fading into the fog as I sped away. From that moment on, the feeling of being watched became unbearable. Even inside the sealed cabin, I felt as though someone, or something, was there with me. The air grew heavier with every passing mile. I kept driving, but my concentration was shot. The steering wheel felt heavier in my hands, and my eyes struggled to stay focused on the road. Every shadow in the fog seemed to take shape, and I couldn't tell if my mind was playing tricks on me, or if there was really something there. The radio, which had been static earlier, now fell completely silent, as if all signals had been swallowed by the mist. The silence inside the cab was oppressive, and with every mile I drove, the sense that something was deeply wrong only grew stronger. I refused to check the mirrors. Something inside me screamed that if I looked, I'd see that figure again, and maybe this time it'd be closer. My instincts weren't wrong. As I rounded a sharp curve, there he was again. The same figure, the same stance, arm raised as if asking for help. But this time, he was closer to the road, almost at the edge of the asphalt. Even from inside the truck, I felt as though his eyes were locked on me. My heart pounded as I slammed on the accelerator, the engine roaring in protest as I sped past him. I tried not to look, but my eyes betrayed me. In the rearview mirror, I saw him slowly turn his head to follow my truck, watching until he disappeared into the fog. By now my hands were trembling on the wheel, and the cab felt smaller, almost claustrophobic. I turned the radio back on, more out of desperation than anything else, and twisted the dial frantically. A faint sound emerged between the static, like a distant whisper, but it wasn't a station. It was as if someone was trying to speak, their voice muffled and far away. I snapped the radio off so hard I nearly broke the knob. My only focus now was getting off that road as fast as I could. I didn't care what, or who, that man was. I just knew I had to get away. The road seemed endless. The fog grew denser, and with every mile my sense of isolation deepened. Then, on a straight stretch of highway, I saw something that made my blood run cold. The figure was standing in the middle of the road, arms stretched out to the sides as if blocking my path. There was no way to avoid him. I slammed on the brakes with all my strength, the truck skidding as the tires screeched on the wet asphalt. When I finally came to a stop, the figure was gone. Just an empty stretch of fog in front of me. My chest heaved as I struggled to catch my breath, the silence around me mocking my fear. I sat there for a few seconds trying to catch my breath and make sense of what was happening. The road ahead of me was empty, but I knew I had seen that figure standing there blocking my way. My mind was spinning with questions I couldn't answer. Who or what was that person? Why did they keep appearing? I decided I couldn't stay there any longer. I took a deep breath, shifted gears, and started driving again, keeping my speed low and my eyes locked on the road. But with every passing minute, the feeling of being watched only got worse. I could feel it, like there was something in the fog following me. A few miles down the road, I noticed something even more unsettling. There were marks on the asphalt, as if something heavy had been dragged along the ground. They stretched on for several feet before disappearing into the mist. My stomach churned. Those marks weren't there earlier, I was sure of it. The fear was becoming overwhelming, unlike anything I had ever experienced before. I thought about stopping to check, but something deep inside me screamed not to. The road felt increasingly surreal, like I was trapped in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. The shadows around me seemed denser, almost alive, and the air in the cab felt suffocating. That's when I heard it. At first I thought it was the wind, but soon I realized it was something else entirely. It was a rhythmic thumping sound coming from somewhere outside the truck. Thump, thump, thump. It was as if someone, or something, was knocking on the side of the truck, but whenever I looked in the side mirrors, there was nothing there. The sound continued, steady and growing louder, closer. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what was happening, but no explanation fit. The only thing I knew was that I needed to get out of there before things got worse. Finally, I saw a sign for a gas station a few miles ahead. The sight of it was an immediate relief. I pushed the accelerator as hard as I could, ignoring the pounding sounds and everything else around me. When the lights of the gas station came into view, I almost felt like crying. I pulled into the lot and parked near the entrance, turning off the engine and trying to calm myself. The silence was deafening. For a moment I thought I was safe, but then I noticed something that sent a new wave of fear coursing through me. In the rear-view mirror, the figure was there again, standing at the edge of the fog, watching me. It didn't move. It just stood there, like a shadow that refused to disappear. I kept staring at the rear-view mirror, unable to tear my eyes away from the figure. It was like time had frozen. My mind refused to accept what was happening, but my body knew something was terribly wrong. With shaking hands, I grabbed my phone, desperately trying to call someone, anyone who could help. The police, a friend, it didn't matter, but the signal was gone. No service. The truck's radio was still silent, as if the entire world outside the fog had vanished. Then, something unexpected happened. The figure raised its arm again. The same motion as before, but this time it felt more like a warning than a plea for help. I decided to step out of the truck. Part of me wanted to confront whatever it was, to prove to myself it was just my imagination or some kind of cruel prank. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped into the cold night air, the chill cutting through me like a blade. I walked toward where the figure had been, or where I thought it had been, but when the beam of my flashlight reached the spot, there was nothing there. Just the dense fog swallowing everything. I looked around, feeling a presence that was almost tangible, but there was nothing I could see. Then I heard it. A whisper, low and nearly imperceptible, coming from everywhere at once. "You shouldn't have stopped." Those were the only words I could make out. I ran back to the truck, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might burst. I climbed in, slammed the door, and started the engine. All I wanted was to get to safety. The gas station lights ahead felt like the only refuge. I floored the accelerator, ignoring the eerie pounding that had returned, echoing faintly against the cab. When I finally pulled into the gas station, I parked near the entrance and bolted out of the truck, almost stumbling as I reached the clerk inside. I blurted out everything, describing the figure, the fog, and the strange occurrences. The clerk listened, his face growing more serious with every word I spoke. When I finished, he gave me a look that chilled me even further. "You're not the first trucker to tell me this," he said. "A lot of people have seen that man in the fog, but you know what's strange? Those who stop and try to help, they never finish their trip." He didn't need to say anything else. To this day, I don't know what happened that night. I've never taken that highway again, not even during the day. I still think about the rhythmic pounding on the truck, the figure standing on the roadside, and the final warning I heard in the fog. I don't know if it was a ghost, an omen, or something my exhausted mind conjured up. But one thing is certain. If I'm ever driving alone and see someone asking for help on a deserted road again, I won't stop. Because sometimes stopping can be the biggest mistake of all.